The church had gone silent again, but this time the silence was suffocating. Every guest seemed frozen, their eyes darting between Ryan and me. My heart hammered so loudly, I thought they could hear it. I had to speak, even if my voice broke. Was Claire a crime? The words slipped out, harsher than I intended, but they cut through the air like a blade. Gasps rippled across the rows. The priest stepped back. My father's grip on my arm tightened, steadying me, bracing himself for an answer. Ryan's face twitched. He laughed once, sharp and humorless, then shook his head as if I were the one making a scene. "Sandra," he said, still trying to hold the mask of composure. "This is ridiculous. She was someone I dated years ago. She left town. That's it." But his eyes told another story. There was fear there, real fear, and no matter how much he tried to bury it, I saw it. Daniel's voice rang from the back again. "She didn't leave, Sandra. She never made it out alive." The words hit me harder than any slap could. My knees buckled slightly, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The murmurs swelled into full-on whispers, questions, people shifting in their seats. I turned back to Ryan. "Tell me he's lying." My voice cracked, but my eyes stayed on his. "Look at me and tell me he's making this up." Ryan's jaw clenched. His smile was gone now. "He's obsessed," he said, his voice lower, darker. "He always has been. He'll say anything to tear us apart." Daniel shouted, his voice unshaking. "Ask him why the police questioned him. Ask him why he was the last one to see her." The crowd gasped again. I felt the room tilting around me, the air heavier by the second. I searched Ryan's face for something: denial, anger, desperation. But what I found instead was silence. He didn't deny it, not once. My father stepped forward, his voice firm. "We're leaving, now!" But I shook my head, refusing to be dragged away. I wasn't going to run from this, not anymore. "You were questioned?" I asked Ryan, my voice sharp now, unafraid. Finally, he broke. "Yes," he hissed, his mask shattering. "They questioned me. They had no proof. Because there was nothing to prove. Claire walked out of my apartment alive, and whatever happened after—" He cut himself off, realizing he had said too much. The whispers in the room swelled into chaos. Phones were filming, guests were standing. The illusion of the perfect wedding had completely collapsed. Daniel forced his way closer, the ushers no longer strong enough to hold him back. He looked at me, not Ryan, his expression raw. "Sandra, she was my sister." The world stopped. My hands went cold. I stared at him, the pieces falling into place like a puzzle I wished I'd never seen. Claire wasn't just anyone. She was Daniel's blood. Ryan's face drained of color. For the first time, he looked cornered. "Sandra, don't listen to him," he spat, desperation cracking his voice. "He's twisting everything." But Daniel's words had struck too deep. And Ryan's silence, his evasions, his rage, they were louder than any proof. I stepped back, clutching my bouquet so hard that petals snapped under my fingers. "You knew," I whispered. "All this time, you knew. And you thought you could bury it under a wedding dress and flowers." Ryan reached for me, panic flashing in his eyes. "Sandra, wait!" I yanked my arm away. "Don't touch me!" My voice was steady now, cold. For the first time that day, I felt in control. My father stepped between us, his face red with fury. "This wedding is over." The priest closed his book without another word. The guests, one by one, began standing, whispering, recording, capturing the collapse of what was supposed to be a perfect day. I turned to Daniel. He wasn't gloating, he wasn't smug. He just looked relieved, like he had finally done what he came here to do. His sister's name had been spoken. The truth had cracked open. And as for me, I wasn't broken, not anymore. I had been betrayed, yes, lied to, humiliated in front of everyone I knew. But in that moment, I realized something powerful. I had been spared. spared from tying my life to a man who carried secrets like weapons, who thought he could control me with silence. I straightened my shoulders, dropped the crushed bouquet onto the floor, and walked past Ryan without looking back. My heels echoed down the aisle, not as a bride, but as a woman reclaiming her life. Outside the church, the cool air hit my skin, sharp and cleansing. Daniel followed but kept his distance, giving me space. My father walked beside me, quiet but steady, like a shield. And I knew then, the wedding was over, but my story wasn't. I had choices to make, truths to uncover, and a life to rebuild, this time on my own terms. Because betrayal may have broken the ceremony, but it didn't break me. And as I stepped into the sunlight, one question burned brighter than the shame I'd left behind. If Ryan was capable of hiding this, what else had the people closest? The music stopped me cold. 100 faces turned toward me, waiting, smiling, some already holding up their phones to capture the moment. My father squeezed my arm and whispered, "Ready?" I nodded, but inside, my chest was tight. Ryan stood at the altar, calm, confident, exactly how he'd been through every stage of this wedding. He looked like a man who had nothing to hide. I wanted to believe in that smile. God, I needed to believe it. But as the doors opened wider and I stepped onto the aisle, the weight of my dress felt unbearable, and my heart beat too fast. That's when I saw him. In the very last row, behind a column of flowers, Daniel, my ex. My stomach dropped so fast I almost tripped. He wasn't supposed to be here. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years, and yet there he was, staring at me like I was the only person in the room. I froze for half a second. Ryan smiled wider at the altar, oblivious, raising his eyebrows as if to say, "Come on." I forced myself forward. Step by step, my heels clicked against the marble floor, every sound echoing like a countdown. But Daniel didn't look away. He didn't clap politely like the others. He leaned forward in his chair, elbows on his knees, studying me with an intensity that made my throat close. My father muttered under his breath, "Ignore him. Keep walking." I tried, I really did, until Daniel stood up. The shift in the crowd was immediate. Murmurs, confused glances, phones lowering. He moved with purpose, slipping past stunned guests until he was standing in the middle of the aisle, blocking my path. My father swore under his breath. Ryan's smile dropped, his eyes narrowing. The priest glanced between us nervously. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't beg. He leaned in just close enough for me to hear and whispered, his voice steady, dangerous. "Sandra, do you really know who you're marrying?" Every hair on my arm stood up. My bouquet wavered in my grip. The words weren't loud, but the silence they created was deafening. I turned to Ryan. His jaw was clenched, a flicker of something, panic, crossing his face before he masked it with a forced smile. He shook his head slightly, like he was warning me not to listen. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Daniel's eyes burned into me, not pleading, not smug. Serious, like a man carrying a truth too heavy to keep. "Ask him about Claire," Daniel whispered. Just 2 more words, but they lodged in my chest like a stone. Claire, a name I'd never heard before. I gripped my father's arm, frozen halfway down the aisle, the entire room waiting for me to decide. And all I could think was, who is Claire? And what does she have to do with the man I'm about to marry? The name echoed in my head as I stood there, bouquet trembling in my hands. Claire. I had never heard Ryan mention anyone by that name. The silence of the guests pressed in, and I knew I had to move, to say something. Anything. I forced myself forward until I reached the altar. Ryan leaned toward me, his jaw tight, smile frozen for the crowd. "Don't listen to him," he whispered, his teeth barely unclenching. "He's trying to ruin this." But my voice came out before I could stop it. "Who's Claire?" For a split second, panic flickered across his eyes. Then, as quickly as it came, he buried it beneath a smirk. Later, he whispered, "Not here." Later, on my wedding day, the words stung like a slap. Daniel's warning wasn't leaving my chest, it was sinking deeper. I turned my head toward him, but two ushers were already pulling him back. He didn't fight. He just called out one last time, his voice echoing through the church. Ask him why Claire never made it home. The room erupted into confused whispers. I felt my knees weaken. Never made it home? What did that even mean? Ryan squeezed my hand hard, forcing a smile for the priest. Ignore this, he hissed. Don't embarrass yourself. Embarrass myself. The words cut sharper than I expected. Suddenly, I wasn't just shaken. I was angry. Angry that he thought the real problem here was me. The priest cleared his throat, trying to steady the chaos. Shall we continue? He asked gently. Ryan nodded quickly, tightening his grip on my hand. I should have nodded too. I should have smiled for the cameras and gone through with it. That would have been the easy choice. But my throat was dry, and one thought refused to let me breathe. What happened to Claire? I pulled my hand back. The murmur of the crowd grew louder, gasps and shifting seats filling the silence. Ryan's smile faltered. Sandra, he whispered, his voice low and sharp. Don't do this. But I couldn't stop myself. My voice, shaky but clear, cut through the noise. Tell me, Ryan. Who is she? His face hardened. The charming man I thought I was marrying slipped away, and for the first time, I saw something else. Fear mixed with rage, and in that moment, a bigger question formed, one that terrified me more than the name itself. If Ryan was hiding Claire from me, what else had he been hiding all along? Ryan's hand tightened on mine, hard enough to hurt. We are not doing this here, he whispered, his voice low but dangerous. The smile he forced for the guests didn't reach his eyes. But my question lingered between us, poisoning the air. Who else? What else had he hidden? The priest shifted uncomfortably, flipping the page of his book as if he could will the ceremony back on track. My father leaned closer, his voice firm. Sandra, do you want to continue? His tone wasn't gentle. It was protective, suspicious. Ryan snapped his head toward him, still smiling for the crowd. Of course she does. She's just nervous. I pulled my hand away again. No, I said, louder than I expected. I'm not nervous. I want an answer. The whispers among the guests grew louder. Phones rose. People weren't watching a wedding anymore. They were watching a scandal unfold. Ryan's jaw worked as though he were grinding his teeth. He leaned close, his voice a blade against my ear. Claire was no one, just a girl I knew. She's gone. End of story. But Daniel's voice from the back row replayed in my mind. Ask him why Claire never made it home. My chest constricted. Gone? I whispered. Or missing? Ryan flinched, just slightly, but enough for me to see it. He quickly masked it with a grin for the crowd, but I caught it. And so did my father. His eyes narrowed at Ryan with a glare I'd never seen him give before. I stepped back, clutching my bouquet like a shield. The weight of 100 stares bore down on me, but I couldn't stop. Why would my ex come here today, risk humiliating himself, if it wasn't true? What are you hiding, Ryan? He turned his head slowly, his smile breaking. Be careful, he said under his breath. You don't know what you're getting into. A chill shot through me. That wasn't the voice of a man begging to save his marriage. It was a warning. The priest finally closed his book. Perhaps we should pause, he said softly. My father took my arm, ready to lead me away, but I froze. I couldn't leave yet. Not without knowing the truth. Not without knowing if the man I loved was involved in something far darker than betrayal. And as I looked into Ryan's eyes, his calm mask cracking, fear bleeding through, I realized a more terrifying possibility. Maybe Claire wasn't just a secret. Maybe Claire was a crime.